Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good start to the day. Sorry for the 2 minutes delay. We had some technical hiccups with preparing our webinar, but I hope everyone's seated and ready to enjoy. My name is Stefan. I'm a salesperson at Nasstar. We're one of the most accredited Microsoft partners in the UK that helps organizations with the implementation, optimization, and ongoing support of Microsoft products. In today's session, we're going to be covering the choosing the right path, specifically how to utilize Microsoft Copilot and other agentic AI products within the Microsoft suite. And with that, welcome to the webinar that is co-hosted with Microsoft. Some of the key themes that we're going to be talking about today are the when should I use Copilot versus Cowork, to where and how shall we build agents, and strategically how organizations like yours should be leveraging the Microsoft suite to avoid building technology debt. I'm going to hand over to Sean, our CTO, who will open with the concept of a frontier firm and the power of AI. So Sean, if I can bring you onto screen, over to you.
You certainly can. Thank you, Stefan. So thanks, everybody. I know we're all busy, so I do appreciate giving up some of your time like you have. So I'm joined today, well, let me start with me. I'm Sean Morris. I'm the CTO of the Microsoft division here at Nasstar. I'm joined by Jack, who runs our automation and AI practice, and very kindly by Aoife from Microsoft, who's one of the AI workforce specialists and just lives in this kind of Copilot space. So I just want to start. I really like by kind of setting the scene here and starting with the core kind of proposition here. And you know, we've all been running at this AI challenge, this new wave of technology that's kind of landed on our doorstep over the last couple of years. But I think it's good to remember what it is we think this new wave of technology is going to bring. And this is a little bit of an old slide, forgive that, but I still think it's true. McKinsey did a report back at the back end of 24 where they argued that the business benefit of this technology to organizations like ours and yours, obviously, is somewhere in that 20% of upside and 20% of cost saving. The idea being you should be able to do 20% more, whether that be revenue, whether it be bringing sales forward, whether it be producing higher quality work output, new products and services, new revenue streams to market. All of that's kind of possible in this AI world. And you should be able to do that for, you know, in the region somewhere of 20% reduction in costs. So, you know, more efficiency, you know, a little bit of headcount. It's a slightly awkward one to talk about, but it's not the only cost savings in here. You can you know, remove licenses from your estate. There's a whole bunch of things, but that's what we're playing for. And we snapped in very quickly to this concept of the frontier firm. This came from a document that Microsoft produced a couple of years ago now, but the themes in this are really good. And we think in order for organizations to make a real stab at that 20% up, 20% down statement from McKinsey, that there needs to be an organizational wide adoption of AI. It's not just finding one or two key use cases and kind of driving AI into that space. Or are we not presenting slides? That would be awkward if it's not working. Can someone just jump in the notes and say whether you can see the slides or not?
I can see them, Sean, from...
Okay, okay, so Mark is saying he's got no slides. Oh, no one can see the slides. Well, that's great. Let me try and stop sharing and reshare. This is exactly the problem we had a minute ago. Sorry about this, troops. It's and I was on a roll. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from somebody? Okay, Lisa, you're good. Mark, can you see them? Okay, we've got some technical issues then with this platform. Tell you what, I mean, it's going to make it slightly less visual, but we can absolutely send the deck out afterwards. We've got most people not seeing the slides. What are the suggestions, team? Do we restart the webinar? Do we crack on?
Sure. Can you, I don't know if it's possible in the webinar format, but can you just, because obviously we're using PowerPoint Live to share the slides, can you just share your desktop and see if that comes through?
I will do that right now. Good call. Apologies, everyone. Let's try that.
It will mean you'll have to be slide master for the whole webinar, but
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that. I love when technology lets you down at the last minute. Sure. And I can. Okay, how does that look?
I can see it, but people in the chat, can you confirm whether you can now see it?
Okay, great.
We've got a load of yeses, so let's crack on with that.
Go old school. Let's go old school. Right, really quickly, that was the McKinsey slide. Frontier firm, just to recap. So let's pick up this. So the you know, and the principle of that kind of broad all of business AI adoption conversation is how do you get AI into your organization such that you're using it across these dimensions? And this was kind of the heart and soul of what the Frontier firm's about. And that is, how do you get it in the hands of your staff to make them individually productive? How do you get it into teams in the forms of kind of task-based agents where people can call on stuff to do to help with their day job? And then I suppose the ultimate objective here is to get into the business a bunch of autonomous agents that are running and sitting in business processes and are attached to data sources in your business, and you're automating chunks of what you're doing. Now, we're talking to customers at the moment across this entire spectrum. We've got some very interesting and exciting things, certainly with some retail customers out in that third column, and also we do a lot of work around adoption in that first bit. So that's kind of setting the scene of what I think we're trying to do and why I think we're trying to do it. Now, we've found that organizations that are running at this and are accelerating their adoption of this have kind of are solving in some way these three problems. It's really, really important to get senior stakeholder buy into this at the highest levels of the business. It needs to be a strategic initiative. The board and the senior leadership need to be able to go, yes, I see the value of this. I can see where we can leverage it. I can see the point of it. You need to bring your staff on the journey. And today's topic fits very much in that right-hand technical world around then what am I buying? What is my agentic architecture, my agentic ecosystem going to be made up from? Now, recently, we've found that the conversation has shifted from do I really need this tech into, right, how should I be doing it? And I think it's fair to say that most of the organizations we're talking to are looking at what their purchasing choices are going to be. I mean, we're talking to several companies that have got pilots for Claude going on. They've got pilots for OpenAI going on. They've got pilots for Copilot going on. And what we're saying, and, you know, revealing the bias here, we're absolutely a Microsoft partner. We're in this world, but we think where Microsoft differs from some of those organizations is that your, you know, the Copilot and AI Foundry universe, just the model becomes less important. And yeah, if you need Claude, you can use Claude. If you need OpenAI, you can use OpenAI. And what Microsoft's bringing is an enterprise-wide framework and the connective tissue, if you will, that brings those models to life inside your organization and inside where people are working in the Office suite, in Teams, in SharePoint, in CRM, whatever. So we think the conversation now is not so much do I need to be doing it, is where am I going to spend my investment dollars in this AI architectures and in these technologies to move us forward. Preamble done. Jack, you want to pick it up from here? I'm going to be the monkey that pushes the go button. So I'll just move on to the next slide, and I'll stay on the screen, but I'll mute myself.
Yeah, cool. All right. So I think this is what you've just been saying, Sean, is one of the significant changes that we're seeing right now. Historically, organizations were approaching AI as almost like a procurement decision, and it was focused on, right, which model are we going to use, or comparing some benchmarks and then picking a vendor and saying that's our AI of choice. The assumption was that if you pick the best model, the rest just kind of took care of itself. But what I think Microsoft have seen early is that enterprises don't just need a model. They need to have a way to operationalize all of this stuff together across their entire organization. And when we look at the reality of an enterprise environment, AI it doesn't just exist by itself. It has to sit alongside identity, security controls, compliance, business applications, data platforms, things outside of your Office 365 or your M365 tenant. And then the challenge isn't just generating an answer. Challenge is kind of embedding all of that into the way that your business actually operates. And that's where the strategy from Microsoft's a bit different to other AI vendors, I think. And Copilot kind of provides that consistent entry point for all of the users. But underneath that sits the orchestration layer that brings together M365, your business data, everything that sits in the Microsoft graph, your security controls, the Power Platform, and then even like the Azure more complex and more kind of pro code Azure AI services. And then you can have custom applications that fit into that as well. So the value isn't that Microsoft gives you access to a certain model, gives you that architecture for consuming all of your AI across an enterprise. And that's becoming really, really important because very few organizations are going to standardize on a single model forever. It seems like every 2-3 weeks, a new model or a new version of a model will come out and it kind of leapfrogs the last. So you don't want to get stuck with all your eggs in one basket. And then different workloads will have different kind of requirements for different models as well. So you might have a scenario where Microsoft hosted models are absolutely the right choice, others where a specialist model might deliver better value for you. And then the future use cases that we haven't even considered yet. Like I said, this stuff moves so quickly. We don't know what we're going to be doing in a month, 6 months, a year's time. We don't know what the models are going to be doing by then. So this is where orchestration becomes really critical, I think. And the approach is not about forcing every workload for a single model. It's about creating a governed environment where your organization can route requests to the most appropriate capability while maintaining that consistent identity, security, compliance, the management controls that I was talking about. And that's what needs to be done in practice, essentially. A user might interact through M365 Copilot, but that request might then trigger a workflow or another Copilot Studio autonomous agent. And that agent might orchestrate across something like Dynamics or SAP or ServiceNow, pick your other line of business application. And it may use different AI capabilities behind the scenes to do the different tasks. So it's all about creating an orchestration layer. And I think the long-term winner isn't going to be organization that pick the right model today. It's the organization that builds that architecture capable of adapting and using whichever model comes next.
Excellent, Jack. Thanks.
Yeah.
Aoife, if you're happy to pick up from here, if I can remember how to move the slide.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Lovely, thank you both. So hi everybody, I am joining from the Microsoft side. So as Sean mentioned, I am an AI workforce specialist here at Microsoft. So I have been in the weeds with M365 Copilot really since it went go to market. So I'm coming into my 3rd year now in this role, and I think what we are really trying to narrate this year is that switch from looking at M365 Copilot as just an end product, an application, a productivity application, and really to switch that and land the message that it's not. It is a platform, as you rightly touched on, Jack. It's a platform for your enterprise AI across the entire business. So it's the foundation that everything else plugs into, not just an app that you open and close. This is really your living, breathing assistant across the entire breadth of your end-to-end your work cycle. So if we're looking at the kind of the 5 value pillars where Copilot feeds into, it's starting with that work IQ. So it's touching into everything that you have access to. It feeds off your information, where you work, who you work with, and that really is the foundation that everything else plugs into. So it meets you where you work across Outlook, Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and also it has, you know, that agentic work and that agentic platform built into it natively as well. So when we're thinking about how we can, you know, democratize this movement across the whole organization and giving people a platform with these capabilities out of the box, that's really where M365 Copilot is, you know, leading that value for us. But today we're going to focus on that multi-model piece. So, Sean, if you could just move me on to that next slide. Here we go. Yeah. So when we're thinking about multi-model, I think we touched on it earlier, but a lot of the customers I speak to, you know, over the last 18 months, the kind of debate we've been up against is, you know, I'd rather using Claude for this task and we're using GPT in this task and Copilot isn't really up to the mark. And, you know, our argument has kind of been, we're not a dog in that fight, to be honest with you. Like, what we're trying to do is bring you those models out of the box. So you're not locking into an AI vendor. You have the choice to pick the best model for the task. And that's really the drive now with Copilot, is to have that multi-model capability out of the box. So there is the option for Copilot to auto default to the best model for the task, but also you as the end user, you can pick the best model for the task. So if you rather using Claude Opus in Excel, you can choose that. If you want to use GPT in Word, you can choose that. But I think what's really important here is to remember that M365 Copilot is a UI for the entire workforce. So it's important that while we're on this call today, and, you know, we might be generally a bit more curious around AI and what the different models have different capabilities and what model works best for what task. You know, if we're trying to bring the entire business on this journey with us, it's important to keep in mind that we've colleagues across different functions, across marketing, across sales, across finance, who aren't going to be as curious as we are and maybe feel a bit overwhelmed with the task of having to figure out where Claude makes sense and when GPT makes sense. So I personally think that auto model picker that comes with Copilot is fantastic. It auto defaults to the best model for the task, but you still have the autonomy to pick the model as well. And Sean, if you could just move me on to that next slide. So what last year, and I suppose for the last 18 months, the multi-model piece has really been focused on OpenAI with Copilot. So you could choose from a multitude of the GPT models, but where that's really after advancing now in the last 3 months is with the introduction of Anthropic as a Microsoft subprocessor. So what this means is with your M365 Copilot now, you can choose from OpenAI GPT models and the Anthropic Claude models. So you really are getting the best of both worlds with your Copilot license. And the roadmap is kind of really driving that multi-model capability forward over the coming months. So what we'd expect to see is, more vendors coming into that play. So you really have kind of the best reach at your fingertips in terms of the leading AI models that you want to work with. And I think what's really important here to touch on as well is that, a lot of the concerns around the Anthropic piece and choosing between these different AI vendors is, am I losing the autonomy over the enterprise data protection and where my data is going, and what kind of risks are associated with having this multi-model capability, and you're not. So any model that you use or any AI vendor that you're using through your M365 Copilot license, it's still bounded by the exact same enterprise data protection permissions that you have been trusting Copilot with since the onset. So nothing that goes into either of those models, be it OpenAI or Anthropic, it's not going to be used to train the model in the back end. It's not going to leave your tenant, and it will remain encrypted at rest and in transit. So it's just giving you that seamless experience to use those multi-models without having the burden of kind of managing multiple different AI vendors in the business as well. So Sean, just on to the next slide, please. So this one here is just kind of touching on, again, the latest OpenAI models. So you had those, Copilot was kind of really grounded on the OpenAI models since the onset, and you're seeing more and more of those model capabilities coming to the product. So you've GPT 5.4 now and GPT 5.3 as well. So all of the latest models, you can access directly within your Copilot experience. And then just onto the next slide, Sean, is around this new Anthropic partnership. So where you're going to see those Claude models pop up across your M365 Copilot experience now. We're just going to look at some of the kind of key flagship features, which I'm personally finding that multi-model capability is making the most difference to both my own work and to the customers that I'm speaking to daily. So the first kind of flagship feature is Claude in Copilot chat. So I know that image on the side is a little bit small, but if you can just see up at the top right-hand corner there, where that toggle is up at the top there, you mightn't see it now, but have a look at your own Copilot after the call, and basically in that top right hand corner you'll be able to either choose auto, so when you're looking at, or when you're interacting with Copilot chat, it will auto default to the best model depending on the prompt that you put into that experience, or you can choose the model yourself, so you can move between the GPT models and the Claude models. So you really can easily switch between those, have a play around with them. I have mine set at the moment on Claude Opus all the time, just because I really like the responses I'm getting, and particularly for anybody that's working across Excel and PowerPoint. If you have found that Copilot has been a bit touch and go when it comes to really having that seamless output when you're working across those applications, have a try with the Claude models, because I've personally noticed a night and day experience using Claude in Excel over GPT, whereas I'm finding the GPT models are still really strong in, you know, Word and kind of Outlook creation and stuff like that. So it's just getting a feel of what works best for you, but in any case it should auto default to the best model for the task. And on to the next one, Sean. So yes, so here is another kind of feature that really is, I suppose, leading on that multi-model capability, and that is critique in researchers. So for anyone that is familiar with the researcher agent, it's a deep reasoning first-party agent that's included with your M365 Copilot license out of the box. I use it multiple times a day. I think it's fantastic for anybody that's, you know, researching customers, or, you know, you want to do market research. This agent is absolutely amazing. So what you can do with the critique feature in Researcher is, it's really, I suppose, raising the bar on the research quality that you're getting back when you're engaging with these agents. So it's not just pulling from more sources, but it's actually having two of the leading models. So it's working with GPT and Claude, and having those models basically check each other's work before you even see the answer. So for an example, GPT maybe drafts the initial response, and then Claude will review it for accuracy, completeness, and then checking citations as well. So what you get delivered back to you has already essentially been peer reviewed by a second model. And Sean, if you just go on to the next slide there as well.
Quick thing on that one.
Yeah, please.
I use Researcher all the time, and that critique bit is absolutely brilliant. And I think something we're seeing and now starting to talk to organisations about are, when we're building agentic solutions, that's some of the functionality they want. And maybe that's two agents. So one agent critiques the other agent using different models, and you can start checking your homework before it goes to a human to review as well. So that's that new functionality, and that ability for one model to critique another is absolutely brilliant, I think.
Absolutely, it is, and I think it gives you a bit more confidence as well when you're kind of, you know, reviewing the source you got back, because a lot of what you're getting back through that researcher agent, it is quite heavy. It can span multiple pages, so I think it just helps having that second pair of eyes for the integrity check on it as well. And it's funny that you say that, because just going off this slide, you'd nearly think we had that planned, but we didn't. So very natural segue there. But it's actually, if you're looking at this, the Draco benchmark for deep research quality, that critique feature, that kind of multi-model deep research system, it's after scoring the researcher with critique as kind of leading in that space. So some people on the call might maybe have been using that you know, that feature set, that critique feature set through, you know, maybe Anthropic or through OpenAI independently. But yeah, this research has found that the researcher with critique is actually leading the strongest output there. So it's yeah, well worth giving it a try. So on to the next slide. Yep. So another really cool feature to give a test of the multi-model capabilities that you have is counsel and researchers. So on a similar note to critique, but with counsel, what researcher does is it runs your prompt across two models in parallel. So you can compare the answers that you get and compare where those answers agree, maybe where they disagree, where they diverge, what each uniquely adds. So it's giving you that option to run your prompt across those two different models and really giving you kind of the autonomy to compare those different responses. So it's really designed, I suppose, for that exploration and comparison and really pressure testing decisions before you kind of going out with that output that you get back. So a really cool feature to kind of see where those models diverge. I use that a lot as well, even just out of curiosity. It's cool to see kind of how the different models analyze the prompt and what different approaches that you're getting back. So a cool feature to try out in Researcher too. And then on to the final one, which is Copilot Cowork, which I'm sure many people have heard about. I feel like this has just taken the market by storm since it went even in frontier testing about 3 months ago now. And really what we're seeing with Copilot Cowork is the shift from Copilot as an assistant to Copilot as a tool you can delegate a task to. So when you're thinking of Copilot at the moment, you're still very much in the driver's seat. You prompt, you get a response, you prompt again. It's quite iterative. Whereas with Copilot Cowork, we're really progressing down that route of you setting a scope of a task and you giving it to Copilot Cowork, and it runs that task for you across multiple different tools, across multiple different artifacts. You're still very much in the driver's seat, so you still are giving it the task and kind of coming back and checking on how it's getting on, but it can go and run that for you and really take that action. So we're moving from assistance to delegation, and that is powered by the Anthropic Claude models as well. So I'm using it a lot in my day-to-day. Let's say if I have a call with a customer today and there's a follow-up action off the back of that call, I need to maybe create a custom PowerPoint, I need to email it to the customer, and I need to schedule time in that customer's calendar, and maybe loop in my manager as an executive sponsor. That's a task that could take me honestly anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the amount of work I need to put into the PowerPoint. So having Cowork as my assistant to, really help me delegate those tasks out to tasks I do, repetitively every day in my role has been an absolute game changer. So that's been a key feature of kind of that Anthropic partnership with Microsoft, just to keep in mind that does require some additional billing capabilities on your side. So that might be a feature that you can access today. And that's really off by default as well, because when you're looking at Cowork, it can become quite pricey quite quickly from a consumption side of things. It's running on a consumption-based billing model. So that's kind of why I wanted to set the scene around. You do still have a lot of multi-model capabilities out of the box with your M365 Copilot license. So before you move to Cowork, have a think about where you can use the Claude models directly in Copilot today, and only start looking to Cowork where you're kind of, like my example, doing a task multiple times a week and you could really get tangible impact out of that. Whereas if you just want to maybe create a more seamless PowerPoint, or maybe you want some kind of deep reasoning analysis in Excel, try first using the Claude models within those applications first, and start looking for Cowork for processes and tasks as opposed to just your end user productivity efficiency. So I think that wraps me up on my slides.
Thanks, Eva.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
Thanks, Eva.
No
worries.
worries.
We could probably talk about Cowork for the rest of the webinar, but I use it all the time. Creating your own skills in it is incredible. But like you said, I think the workflow needs to be, you start in Copilot, probably in Copilot chat, move to the application specific Copilots. And then, like you said, when you've got something that you need it to run off and do by itself, that's when you move into Cowork. I also use Copilot to actually help me create the prompt for Cowork so that it's the most efficient it can be.
Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah. And I think we're seeing that coming a lot more to Copilot as well. Whereas, let's say you've an end user and you're just, asking a prompt in Copilot chat, it's going to start prompting to say, have you tried running this in research, or maybe put in an analyst agent. And I think that's really important when you're thinking of controlling costs as well. How are we making sure people are, using the right tool for the job as well? So it's a really good point.
Excellent. So it's almost like we planned this. That moves us on to the topic of cost. So, I think I certainly hear a lot of people going and getting stuck in that. What's the license cost of all this stuff? So, Jack, you want to pick up on that thread?
Yeah. So I think that's one of the kind of biggest mistakes you can make when you're like evaluating AI platforms, is just looking at a license cost. And a license cost comparison, maybe. On the surface, that's quite an understandable thing to do. But if we compare one monthly license cost against another monthly license cost, are we considering all of the other things that we need? So like we talked about earlier, if you come and bring in a different AI vendor, how does your identity management integrate into that? How does it talk to your enterprise data? How are your permissions enforced across that data? Is it compliant? How are you monitoring it? How is it being governed? How are you extending this into other business processes? And how does that integrate into the existing productivity tools that you've got? And then how does that scale? So those, again, we talked about architectural decisions before, and often they can create significantly more cost and complexity than just the cost of an AI license, I think. So when Microsoft talks about value, it's not just talking about access to a language model. It's bringing together all of those different things and integrating it into things like Entra, your Defender, your Purview, your governance controls, etc. And it becomes increasingly important as organizations move from that experimental phase, where we talked about with the 3 pillars at the start, into actually operationalizing it. And then the real cost isn't just from the first deployment. It's once we've got loads of agents and loads of different AI models running, we need to be able to manage and govern all of this. So importantly, and Aoife mentioned it earlier, is we want to have a platform that can adapt as our requirements change. So can it support future capabilities? Is it going to be multi-agentic? Can it integrate into your business applications? Can it operate within your existing governance frameworks? And can it support that long-term adoption and scale as well? Because what we were talking about before with, do I use Cowork? Do I use chat? Do I use the one within the applications? That becomes into an adoption piece, and we want to make sure that it's easy to adopt. And those tend to have a really big impact on the total cost of ownership and that license might have. And like I said before as well, this market's going to look completely different in 12 months. So we need something that's adaptable, and it's not just the cost of a single license.
Yeah, and just jumping on the value topic as well, dragging it right back to my intro piece. I think and we're seeing this a lot with organizations. It really is that ROI conversation, right? I'm about to spend a ton of cash on a new piece of technology. It's often sat with the IT function initially as an investment in tooling. And where we're getting success is organizations are starting to understand, what that value looks like for them. And I think when you holistically look at this from that value perspective, the investment, although non-trivial, is put into perspective, right? And I think, really where we've come this, and the reason we're running this webinar today, is that we think the risk of organizations jumping in on one model is potentially building next year's technical debt, right?
Absolutely.
Now the tools are great. I'm not here to bash any of them, right? I mean, I've got friends and colleagues that work in entirely called enterprise spaces. I've got friends and colleagues that are pushing in on the new GPT work environment. They're all good, right? But I think what we think is, if you step back from all of that and go, I want to deploy into my business a framework of agentic services, and I don't want to be placing bets on any one model over another one today. I think that's kind of the heart of what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Now, if you jumped on, you want to say something?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. The one thing I was just going to add is I think the stat last year was 78% of knowledge workers were bringing their own AI to work. So I can't even imagine what that is now. But if it's just coming back to that point, if we're not kind of setting the direction, from top down, that this is the platform that we're using, this is, kind of the enterprise direction we're going in, the risk is that, there is pockets of innovation across the business. There's probably people speaking to multiple different vendors and multiple different service teams kind of selling you the dream around what we can do for your department. So I think it's coming back to setting that direction with a platform, to your point, Jack, with an architecture as well. So we could have somewhere consolidated, we can measure that ROI from the business, not just kind of pockets of innovation that don't really go anywhere long term.
Okay, great. And on that note, if that stat of people bringing their own AI to work terrifies you, we actually did a webinar 2 weeks ago about shadow AI discovery and governance around that using Purview. So a bit of a plug of a previous one. If you reach out to Steph and Chloe and the team, I'm sure there's a link to the recording there. But we were exploring that topic in a little bit more depth. Right now, Jack, take us home on some adoption related stuff, if you can, my friend. Hang on, let me.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think part of this is an education thing as well. It's getting people familiar with the environment they're working in.
Yeah, and like with most of this webinar, we've focused kind of heavily on strategy and architecture, and we've talked about orchestration and governance and things like Copilot, Azure, Foundry, and that kind of operating model. But probably the most important part, and the reality that can't be ignored, is none of it creates value on its own. Are perfectly designed, and I've said this at numerous talks and things, but you could build the best agentic framework and multi-agent orchestration platform and have a bunch of agents ready to do a load of stuff. But if you don't get your people on board, it's just going to fall flat and they'll go back to their old ways of working. So adoption is absolutely key. And that's why we kind of think about AI in these three connected layers. So strategy first, understanding where your organization wants to go. What's the problem it's trying to solve as well? I mean, we've spoken to some organizations who said, I need to do AI, and you ask them why, and they can't even articulate that. So the strategy needs to be set. What's the problem they're trying to solve? Second comes that architectural piece. So we're designing the platforms, the governance, security, everything else that goes around that we talked about today. But like I said, probably the most important bit is adoption. And that's where the real value gets created, I think. And organizations seeing the greatest return, certainly from M365 Copilot, just the licensed version by itself, aren't necessarily those with really sophisticated agentic patterns. They're the organizations that have been most successful at changing people's behaviors and how they work and creating confidence so that people know how to use these systems. And then when you get more advanced and you start doing clever things with agents, your users are already on that journey and are already learning and taking the right steps to be able to use those new features that you're going to start introducing. So our focus doesn't just stop at implementation. You have to be able to wrap around adoption. I've just got the 5-minute notification, so we're probably going to have to speed things up a bit. So I guess what are the key elements to this? So one of the things that we at Nasstar certainly learned when we first did our Copilot deployment, and from loads of customers, and I'm sure Aoife could say that loads of customers Microsoft talk to, is that adoption rarely fails because of the technology. It usually fails because people just assume it will automatically change the way people work. And the first principle to think about that in adoption journey is it is a journey. And that's a bit of a cliched word, but it's not just an event. It can't be a one-time thing. Lots of organizations launch AI with a kind of a single announcement, a quick training session and a license assignment, and then they wonder why usage drops off afterwards. Because people get that initial excitement, but then again, they'll go back to their old ways of working. And only once you've got that foundation in place, do you start to focus on scaling it across your organization. And every organization has people who naturally embrace new technology. Often they're referred to as champions in an adoption framework. They've become that kind of bridge between the program, the team, and then your wider organization. And they're absolutely key to success. They're the people who are discovering new use cases, sharing their success stories, helping colleagues, and demonstrating what's possible in the way that's relatable to that kind of role and that persona as well. And that's why persona-based training is really, really important, I think. Rather than just teaching generic product features, you need to have a focus on a role-specific scenarios that help people solve those real problems. There's a lot of words on this slide, so I won't go through all of them, but prompting is really, really key, making sure your people know how to prompt correctly. Also, use Copilot to help you prompt as an absolute game changer. I always teach that to people: get into Copilot, tell them what you want to do, and get them to give you a prompt to give to something like researcher or to analyst. It will help massively. Copilot's the best expert in Copilot in the room. It's better than all of us at it.
Yeah. So just on that as well, I think just bringing this back to the topic as well. I mean, there's a lot of elements to this agentic kind of world that we're living in now, and I think what's key here, as well as all the things Jack said, is also educating people on where to use what and how. That ways of working that Jack was talking about earlier, where you move from Copilot, you use Copilot to help with the prompts, you move into the apps, you move to the agents, and getting people aware of that ecosystem and how they sit in the middle of it and what kind of strings to pull to get the best outcome they need. I mean, we had an example here when Cowork went from frontier mode into paid mode in July. We had become completely hooked on the drug of Cowork, and all of a sudden we're having to pay for it. So we had to go around and educate everyone and say, no, let's adjust our ways of working to adopt to this new model. Cowork's got a place. It's very, very good at some things. Well, it's very, very good at everything, but it comes at a cost, right? So we were having to work out and work with our teams where to use what and educate them on that, which is all part of this adoption piece. We are getting very close to time. So just quickly on that, I mean, this is an example of what like a 12-week adoption program will look like. We probably don't need to go into huge detail here, but you know, it is a thing. This is a start of a thing. I think a lot of organizations pick this up and then they run it probably indefinitely, but we can kind of help set all that up. And as part of that is that education around what to use, where, and how, and what have you. So, so that's kind of it. I mean, from a call to action point of view, I mean, if this is all stuff that you're thinking about, I mean, I can't have a session like this with Microsoft in the room and not bring up funding. So, yeah, Microsoft, they've just their new FY27 programs. If you are Microsoft shops, and presumably you are, because you're on this call talking or listening to us, you know, there's often programs and funding available to kind of walk you into some of this stuff. We're obviously happy to help with any of that. So if there's any help or anything that's piqued your interest in this in the last 45 minutes of us chatting that you might want to look at a bit further, then please reach out. You know, the team will get in touch on the back of this. We'll send the deck out, I believe. So that's kind of it. We're at time. Any final comment, Aoife, Jack, Steph? I can't leave you out.
I was just going to jump in and just quickly thank everyone for bearing with us and being patient as we got the deck online. As Sean said, there's often funding available to support you through each one of these stages. We know that it's not a procurement decision anymore. It's not a licensing decision when it comes to AI. So we'll be in touch through your Microsoft account execs or specialists like Aoife to tell you what funding is available and how we could best utilize it. So once again, thank you for joining us. We might hang on for a minute just for everyone to wrap up. And if you have any questions, we're still here.
Excellent. Thanks, Steph. Thanks, team. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.